Welcome everyone. So here we are, 2020, an unusual year, and I am once again giving my standard state of the project update. So first of all, let's talk about what is new in VuFind since the last summit. We've had a few releases, 6.1 and some patches, and 7.0 and one patch. Significant changes include some updated dependencies as of release 7.0. We now require PHP 7.2, which hopefully is not unreasonable given that end of life for 7.2 is in November, so we better start thinking about 7.3. More significantly, the Zend framework project has rebranded itself as Laminas, and so VuFind has been updated to use Laminas instead of Zend framework. This turned out not to be a hugely disruptive change, but it still took a lot of time over the past year just to get everything cleaned up and to make sure that all of the third-party dependencies that use Zend were also updated to Laminas, but we got there. Additionally, because Zend framework's console tools have been deprecated, all of VuFind's console functionality was migrated to use Symfony console instead, which I have to say is a great improvement. I think the tools look nicer, are more consistent, and the code is now easier to maintain. So all of those were good things. And we're ready to stay up to date moving forward. We also, of course, had some new and improved features. Significantly, there's now an option to get email alerts when new results are added to search results. So users can subscribe to searches and be notified when new records are added which match their query terms. We've added support for content security policies. So you can enforce a security policy on your VuFind instance to protect against cross-site scripting and other common vulnerabilities. The CAPTCHA mechanism has been made pluggable. VuFind has supported CAPTCHA for a long time, but it had sort of hard-coded in support for Google's reCAPTCHA service. Now you can build plugins to support other things, including locally generated images and text. And we've improved our content for serving up static content through VuFind to support Markdown. So if you have, about pages or other static content that you want to incorporate into VuFind, it's easier than ever to do that. And of course, there are always lots of minor new features, new settings, and new integrations with third-party services. And if you want all of the gory details on that, you can take a look at the changelog in the wiki. The past year also saw a lot of changes to the way we interact with our community following discussion at last year's summit to try to streamline things and make all of our content more accessible. So we restructured the developers call into a community call. We reduced the frequency, but tried to make the scope broader. A lot of the old lists of things I would read and bore you with in the dev call have been moved into a newsletter that you can skim or ignore at your own convenience. And the community call itself is more focused on pressing discussions and sharing of general knowledge in the form of tutorial videos. Speaking of which, we have a video library now that grows every month. So you can get a tutorial on how to install and configure VuFind, and how to do a lot of common tasks. And we'll just keep growing that because we record a new video on every community call. I still have the next few months planned out, but I'm always open to suggestions and requests. Anything that makes VuFind more accessible to everyone is a good thing. There's also a training program about to launch, thanks to Mohan Pradhan from HealthNet, who spoke yesterday, for doing the majority of the work in bringing this all together and organizing it. I've been offering as much support as I can, but it's great to have others in the community leading this effort forward and hopefully bringing VuFind to many new people. And of course, we have this, the International VuFind Summit. Not quite in the form we would have expected prior to the pandemic, but it's wonderful to be reaching such a large geographical area and to have so many people attending. Thanks to all of you. I hope that what we learned from this year's summit can be applied in future years, regardless of whether we're in unusual international circumstances. But of course, in spite of all of those changes, there's always room for improvement and growth, and I welcome feedback on ways we could do things better, and that will certainly be part of what we can talk about in the road mapping session tomorrow. So having talked about what's new, let's talk about what's next. In case this is your first VuFind Summit, in every summit, we sort of end in a road mapping session where we talk about what we've seen and what we want to do in the next year, and we set some goals. And so I always like to include in my updates sort of some inspirational ideas to get everyone thinking so that we can have as productive a conversation as possible during the road mapping at the end. So first of all, let's talk about the next couple of releases. If we follow our usual pattern, we should have VuFind 7.1 out early next year. And these point releases usually focus on just adding some new features on top of the last major release. The biggest feature that's currently in development, and again, this was alluded to yesterday if you were watching, is record version support so that VuFind can provide a mechanism for linking together related versions of a work. This goes toward addressing the request for FFRBR support, which has been an open ticket for probably a decade. I think it's really nice, and many thanks to Eero Majala for sharing all of his work on this. I also hope that 7.1 will include a beta version of a new theme that Chris has been working on developing. It's been a while since we've revamped the theme. We want to take an accessibility first approach, but we also don't want to force people off the existing themes too quickly. So we'll give you something that you can test drive, but it won't be in its final form or official yet. It will just be a new optional feature. Then probably during the summer of next year, VuFind 8 will come out, again, following the usual rhythm of a feature release early in the year and a major release later in the year. I hope that we'll be able to include the upgrade to Solar 8 in this release. It had originally been planned for VuFind 7, but due to some delays with Solar Mark releases, we ended up pushing it back. But I will be refocusing on that as time permits. Major releases are always an opportunity for architectural improvements and minor backward compatibility breaks, which we try to avoid in our feature releases. So I expect that there will continue to be some cleanup and improvements there. And perhaps by 8.0, we will have gotten enough feedback on our beta theme to release an official version of the new theme. But again, these are just some ideas. There's room to flesh this out, and we'll discuss that in road mapping tomorrow. Another big development, and I've been talking about this to some extent for the past couple of years, is figuring out VuFind's relationship with the Open Library Foundation, whether we want to officially and permanently join. And we are reaching the point where this decision really needs to be made, and we have the information we need to make the decision. But it's going to require some significant work and discussion within the community to make it happen. So if we were to join the Open Library Foundation, part of what this would do would be to establish VuFind as an independent nonprofit organization, which would be affiliated with the Open Library Foundation. But right now, VuFind is more of an idea than a real world thing. Certainly the project lives at Villanova and is supported by Villanova in some sense, but it also has massive use and participation worldwide, but all of this is informal and it's just working on the goodwill of everyone involved, which has gotten us a long way. And I certainly don't want to undervalue goodwill. But I think there could be some value in making VuFind a more tangible thing. But if we want to do this, we need people to actually participate to make this organization work. It requires an official manager, treasurer, and secretary. And while I certainly remain highly committed to VuFind and intend to lead the community as long as my leadership is needed and desired, it would be great to get more people involved and not just have me putting on all the hats. So that's one thing to think about. Another aspect of this is succession planning. Again, every time I talk about this, I don't want people to think, oh, Demian's leaving, oh, Villanova is abandoning the project, because none of that is true. I remain committed to this in the long term, but at the same time, I'm not immortal and indestructible, and I'd like to think that the project has the ability to survive beyond me if some unforeseen circumstance should occur. And so I think we need a better mechanism for figuring out what happens if things change. And part of that involves having a more formal community structure, which again ties into having VuFind exist as an independent organization. If we're going to do this, we need to define some things, and we need to agree upon those definitions. And I think that takes some work and some collaboration. Another layer of this is raising funds. Right now, VuFind is powered pretty much exclusively by the time that organizations are willing to contribute of their staff. So Villanova allows me to use a large part of my job to run the project, and developers at many institutions that use VuFind are allowed to contribute things back to the project. This is all great, but it's also somewhat intangible. If VuFind exists as an independent organization, it can have its own bank account and it can collect its own funds. And this money could be used to give it more sustainability. For example, to have an emergency fund to hire a project manager should there be a gap in coverage, or even if we had sufficient funds to hire a dedicated developer to work on the project independently of institutional requirements. These may be somewhat pie in the sky, and I don't know how far we can get. It's also worth noting that Open Library Foundation itself charges some fees for the services it provides, and we need a way to pay those. But in any case, if we're talking about money, we need to think about some kind of membership model. And that does not in any way mean I'm saying VuFind would not continue to be free. It would. But it means that organizations that want to ensure VuFind's long-term sustainability and future would have a way to invest in that, and a documented plan for how that investment would actually ensure sustainability. A lot of open source projects do this. VuFind has gotten away with being highly informal for a long time. But again, the last year and all of the uncertainty we've seen has sort of been a good reminder that maybe we need to formalize more of this. So again, this is a discussion I'd really like to start within the community. It's not something that I want to simply decide upon myself and declare. It needs to be a conversation. So this is something I want to include in our road mapping conversation tomorrow, and I raise it here so everyone can think about it. So that brings us to road mapping. I've certainly probably already given you some things to think about, but some more. Well, community development, we've just talked about that. Are there features that your institutions need but don't have that should be prioritized? That's always something we take into consideration. Have you made local code customizations that might be shareable with the community? I'm always happy to work with people to make their local code more reusable and suitable for inclusion in the project. If you haven't done that before, talk to me, we'll figure out a way. Are there more needs for tutorials, documentation, and training? Where is improvement most needed? how can we make things more accessible? That's always an ongoing need. I welcome lightning talks. We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but tomorrow we're going to start the day with some inspirational presentations, and then there will be a slot for discussion and lightning talks. And if you want to quickly share something that you think is important or interesting about something you've done with VuFind or something you'd like to see done with VuFind, you can take 5 minutes and share it with us. There's a document I'll link to on the next slide that you can use to sign up for that. And also think about how you can help. What are you able to give back to the project to help keep us all going? And as I say, whether that's talking about the project, bringing more people in, whether it's committing a little bit of time to perhaps a working group to think about community structure, or of course contributing code, all is welcome. But we couldn't be where we are without a lot of people helping in a lot of ways. So that's really all I had to share to introduce the day. And I see that there's some time left for questions and discussion. I think we should save really in-depth discussion till road mapping, but I'm certainly happy to answer questions about what I've presented on this morning or general VuFind issues for a few minutes before we move on. And also, as I mentioned, there's a conference planning document where we'll be collecting ideas during road mapping and where you can sign up for lightning talks. There's that long, ugly URL there, but if you just go to vufind.org, you'll see a banner at the top announcing the summit. And if you click on that, it'll take you right to this page. And from there, you can get to the planning document. And of course, if you think of something later, I am always responsive to input. So feel free to email me, Slack me, or reach me in any other way you can figure out. All right.
Thank you very much, Demian, for this very insightful update on VuFind. There actually was a question, but I saw that Ari just answered it about the FFRBR feature. So I think, so just a short, quick reminder to please use the Q&A option of Zoom. So yeah, we are ready to take your questions.
It seems everyone is just watching in stunned silence. So should we perhaps...
I got a question. I got a question.
Great.
Yeah. So tell me, I would love to know a little bit more about the the association you were talking about when it comes to VuFind and changing it or transforming it to another form, to get a membership there and to be like part of something bigger. What is this institution, or I don't have the right word in English right now. What are they doing? How could like VuFind be part of this and contribute or provide anything? Because I don't have a clue right now what this means, but I would perfectly love to know, because it's like a common thing that will happen. That things are changing, so I would love how much things could change, or what is the benefit of this.
Certainly. So the Open Library Foundation is a nonprofit organization that was founded to support the new open source Folio ILS system. But they quickly took on some other projects as well, including the Coral Electronic Resource Management System and the Project Reshare, which is a resource sharing project that's just starting up, as well as several others. And VuFind has been expressing interest in participating with the organization for some time. So the design of Open Library Foundation is to provide support for open source projects, but in a fairly lightweight way. They don't dictate how the project needs to be run. And they don't really force anything on the project. They just provide some infrastructure services and things like banking and legal support that are commonly needed by projects, but which institutions tend to be reluctant to take on. So I've been interested in the OLF since it formed because I think VuFind has a really complementary role there because, you know, Folio, for example, made the conscious decision not to include a discovery layer because things like VuFind exist. So having these two highly complementary projects existing within the same organization and having opportunities to sort of collaborate and cross-pollinate made a lot of sense to me. I liked the lightweight approach because I think, as I say, we've existed very well with relatively little structure for a long time, and I don't want to overdo it with structure. But at the same time, I think we need a little more than we have because I feel at the moment that too much depends on me. And well, as I keep saying, I'm highly committed to the project. I really don't want to be the single point of failure if some unforeseen event occurs. And while I absolutely believe that others in this community are fully capable of picking up the project and carrying it on without me, it would be much easier for those kinds of contingencies to be addressed if we had talked about it first and come up with a plan as a community. I don't know if that fully answers your question, but hopefully that provides at least some useful background.
Indeed, thank you very much. Do you think, like, from personal point of view, because I do, some things are mixing, like a project that is like developing, transferring into something new, then there's you and your role and all this thingy happens in the world over the last couple of months that were very scary and changing somehow. Is it something that comes from you strongly? I'm just curious about this. Like now it's a time, like sometimes you have to just think about going on, just not in a way of leaving, but in a way of taking the next step. And I would love to know how your point of view in this is like, yeah, now it's good. Now we please do something else.
I mean, this is something I've been thinking about for several years, just wanting to ensure that the project's future is safe and secure. So certainly recent events haven't prompted any of this because it was already moving along. I think they've just emphasized the importance and relevance of it. And as I say, I don't really see any change in you know, the degree of commitment or support of the project by the people and organizations that are currently supporting it and committed to it. It's just that if you look at hypotheticals, there are a few key players that are really important. And if something were to change unexpectedly, it would create challenges. And so I just want to get well ahead of that and make sure that we don't have to worry about it at all, as opposed to maybe just a little bit right now.
So we do have another question. Maybe there's still a bit of time. PS Mukhopadhyay asked if there are any plan for bibliocultural resource integration in the forthcoming VuFind versions. You can see the question in the Q&A.
Before we get to that, there was another question that I just answered in the Q&A about bandwidth consumption. Someone was concerned about the amount of data that Zoom is using. So I'd like to propose that panelists who aren't currently speaking or answering questions might turn their video off to help reduce bandwidth. Doesn't say there's any connection issues right now, but I think overall it'll reduce the amount of data flowing around the conference and it might assist people who have limited bandwidth.
Thanks, Chris. To answer the question about bibliocultural resource integration, I'm not entirely sure I'm clear on what's being asked there, but I do know that there are various cultural heritage organizations preserving resources and providing APIs for access to those resources, such as Europeana and the DPLA in America. And VuFind already has some plugins for leveraging those APIs to display related resources from those services. So perhaps that's something that could be expanded with further services or improved. But it's also possible I'm answering the wrong question. So if so, if you want to clarify slightly, I'll try again.
If I would take the chance now, because if we still have some minutes, I don't want I won't waste time if Demian is available like now. You told about the record versions, FFRBR, and could you give me some details about this, because I thought something that we have, like doing grouping stuff. But if you got some more information for me, just a little, I would love to maybe connect this in my presentation.
So the very short version is, if you take a look at pull request 1581, you'll see all of the work in progress on this. Era is here and might be able to speak to this even better than I could. But the very short version is that we're generating keys based on uniform titles or author title combinations during indexing, and then using those keys to group things together, or rather to interlink between related things.
Here we go. Since we still have 2 minutes, here it is in action. So this is just some simple stuff. Do a search. You see that there are show other versions link. Click on the link. See that these are the other versions for this thing. And then you can see them all as a search result. This all works by indexing so-called work keys, which are used to identify different expressions of the same work. And we are still working on that pull request to make things perfect, but I believe this will be really nice. Of course, just the beginning, and things could change, and this can be expanded, and it will never be perfect, but it will be pretty cool anyway. So that's shortly what I'd like to say now.